Hey guys, it's Ellen Brock, freelance editor. This is part 4 of my Q&A, so if you missed the other parts and you want to see them, I'll put a link. I'm just going to go through your questions and answer them. This is unscripted, so hopefully I won't ramble too much and bore you, but I hope that you guys enjoy this because I enjoy doing the Q&A and I really like talking about writing with you guys, so I hope you guys like it. And let's go ahead and get started. The next question is from Bjorn, who asks, if I self-publish first, does that make it harder later on to have my novel published professionally? By professionally, I think you just mean like a traditional publisher. And yes, it definitely makes it harder. It is possible to have success self-publishing a novel and then have publishers want to like a traditional publisher want to publish the novel because it's done so well with self-publishing and they can back it with marketing and they can push it so that it does really well. This has happened for a number of novels, but it's not common. The vast majority of novels, 99+% of novels, do not start as self-published, and most publishers and agents don't really want a self-published novel. The main reason being at the point that somebody wants to traditionally publish a self-published novel, it's usually because the self-published novel failed and they want to now have a traditional publisher to back them, but the agent or the publisher usually will not want a novel that has already been published and it's already been read by other people. A publisher does not want other versions of a novel floating around. They don't want to have other people have heard about the novel, especially if it got bad reviews or if it didn't sell well. I would choose carefully whether or not self-publishing is something you want to do. A lot of people think that it gives you control and that it's easy, but it's not easy. The average self-published writer will not make any money and will not sell copies of their book to any significant degree. And it can be a really frustrating process, sort of like building up a business. It's not easy to do. And the people who do it work really, really, really hard at it. So if it's something that interests you, that's awesome and you should totally do it. But you definitely have to be really committed to making it work. And there's not a lot of going back to traditionally publish the same book. It's difficult. It can be done, but it's difficult. So Blake also asked, does a novel have to be identified as young adult or middle grade, or can it be made simply for any age, no specific target group? You definitely need to pick a target age group. The reason for this is that the bookstore and the library are divided by age, and they're not going to carry 3 sets of your book so that they can put it in young adult, middle grade, and adult. They're going to put it in one section. So you need to pick what that section is going to be, and that will guide how it's marketed and where it is put in the bookstore. The other thing is most people think that their novel has wider appeal than it actually does, and this is beyond just age group, but most people believe that their novel will appeal to everybody or to most people, and it just won't. And if you try to make everybody happy, you won't make anybody happy. And it's much better to actually directly target the age group that you want. Of course, there are some novels that cross those boundaries and are read by multiple age groups or by different age groups, but it's not that common. I don't think it's nearly as common as writers think that it is. Most novels will not cross those boundaries of age. And the ones that do are typically going older rather than younger. They might go younger, but something like Harry Potter was very popular, and then though the first book was middle grade, it started to be read by YA readers and by adult readers. And The Hunger Games is one that actually went both directions, and younger readers and older readers read it, but it was not untargeted. It's a very specifically YA book. It has lots of very specific YA elements to it. So yes, I would target your book. You're not going to have much luck selling it otherwise, and you're not going to have much luck getting an agent if you don't have a very specific age group. They need to know that you know how the market works and you know where your book fits. So choose an age group, choose the one that makes the most sense. Okay, so the next question is from Tracy, who said, when writing a mystery, thriller, suspense where the antagonist is one of the POV, the point of view characters, and you don't want to reveal him, would you write he instead of his name? Somebody else actually asked the same question. In general, this is actually done so often that a lot of people will consider it to be sort of a trope, and people will know what you're doing. So basically, if you use he or she instead of identifying the name of a character, the reader will expect it to be a big reveal when you finally let them know who this character is. And this can be problematic because most readers are pretty familiar with this because they've seen it before. And it can be kind of frustrating to know that the writer is hiding some element of the story, and especially if the reveal doesn't live up to the expectation. If you reveal who the character is and it doesn't really matter and the reader's just sort of like, oh, okay, well, it's that guy, then you're probably going to damage the story more. But I understand what you're saying. So you definitely can do it. It will not be unfamiliar to readers, so just keep that in mind as you execute it. And you might also consider alternatives like using a nickname or a shortened version of a name or in any kind of alternate name just to give the character some kind of identity. Depending on what you're writing, the reveal could just end up feeling either anticlimactic or a little bit like it's been done before, because there's just so many books that have been released that have this reveal of identity of the antagonist, and so you just need to really think about how you're going to do it in a way that's different or unique. The next question comes from Chris, who said, my question is on talking about my novel. People are starting to ask what it's about, and I'm struggling to describe it. I don't know what to say and what to leave out to keep from spoiling it. I want to represent it well, but sometimes get blank stares. I'm also unsure about whether to describe it as urban fantasy. It's contemporary with angels and demons, but it's not set in a metropolitan area. I feel like the word urban suggests that it should be. It sounds like you're just writing fantasy. Fantasy doesn't have to be historical or alternate universe or anything like that. It just sounds like fantasy. So you don't have to call it urban fantasy. You can call it contemporary fantasy if you want. But yeah, you can just call it fantasy. That's fine. In terms of describing your novel, I would try to get to the root and the core of your novel and describe specifically the central conflict and what the character has to do, what the protagonist has to do. Basically the same thing you would do with a query letter, except like probably a little shorter. Say you were writing Harry Potter, you might say something like, it's about a boy wizard. He goes to a wizarding school, makes some friends, and he has to fight this evil guy who wants to kill him. It's a children's fantasy. That's probably all that the average person is really going to want to know about your novel, and they'll probably take the conversation from there and ask questions if they're interested, or just sort of nod and smile if they're not interested, and that's all you really need. I wouldn't try to get too sales pitchy if you're just telling friends or family. If you need to make like an elevator pitch because you're going somewhere like to a convention or whatever, then you need to just sort of script it out and then memorize it so that you can spout it off and make it sound very natural. So I don't know if that helps you, but I hope that it does. Okay, so this is another question from Yanni, who asks, when does something philosophic in a story become pretentious? Usually the only time that something becomes pretentious is when it's pushed really hard, when it's overemphasized, or when the writer sort of gets a little bit arrogant about it. And sometimes it's like arrogance comes across in the writing, and if you're being philosophic about something that could be controversial or could offend some people, it's possible at that point that you could seem pretentious more because you seem arrogant, or like you're telling other people how to live or telling other people what to think, and that can be frustrating because you have to remember also that people read novels to have fun and to be entertained. Yes, they might learn something, and yes, there are serious novels, but most of the time people are reading to be entertained. And if they feel like you're taking advantage of that to try to push your own opinion, that's normally when you come across as pretentious. In terms of just being philosophical in general, it's probably okay if you're not pushing it too hard, but it really depends on the circumstance. It's really hard to determine that without knowing what kind of situation you're talking about. But just be careful that you're not pushing a message really hard in a book that otherwise doesn't need it. If it's not necessary to tell the story, people will probably see it as you pushing your opinion or your ideas on them when they don't necessarily want that. So it's sort of your call, but that's my take on the matter. Okay, so this question comes from Mid Fernando, who says, sometimes it feels like the course recommends we write in a somewhat formulaic way, e.g. first plot point 20%, midpoint at 50%, pinch points later, etc. Do all good novels have to conform to these conventions? A lot of the time, people believe that story structure is formulaic. I understand why people worry about that their novel's going to be too formulaic or it's going to seem like every other novel or whatever. But story structure is just the framework. It's sort of like the framework of a house. You would not tell an architect that his work is formulaic because it uses supports and it has windows and it has bathrooms and it has all the expected things that you would want to see in a house. The structure is very old and it's very intuitive to most readers. It's not some construct of publishers to try to make like popular fiction or to try to get writers to conform to some sort of difficult process to write really commercial novels. It's just the framework of story that's been used for a very, very long time. It works very nicely. Readers are comfortable with it. Readers expect it. And when things don't conform to this standard, readers typically do not like it. Does every novel ever conform to these conventions? No. But so it's up to you. It's not that it's impossible to write good fiction that doesn't conform to it. It would just be relatively unusual, only in that the best-selling books typically do, and the books that sell really well typically do, and most novels from big publishing houses typically do. But of course, there are always exceptions to this. So that's all the questions that I'm going to answer today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you got some value out of it and you learned some things. And if you guys like this video, I will do another Q&A sometime soon, but I'll also keep doing my one topic videos, and let me know what you want to see, what your requests are, and I will see you guys soon. So thanks so much for watching.